Welcome everyone to the Things Around 8. In this video we will talk about the approval of a very controversial law that will allow the United States to sell frozen Russian assets to finance support for Ukraine. And if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe now and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any news. Before Russia invaded Ukraine on February 24, 2022, the Russian economy was perfectly integrated into the European and North American space, with Russian citizens, banks and companies carrying out daily transactions involving billions of dollars. In Europe, the main Russian product was energy, such as oil and especially natural gas. Thanks to gigantic pipelines capable of transporting absurd amounts of gas, Russian gas was much cheaper than from other sources, leading many European countries, notably Germany, the Baltic countries and Italy, to sign large contracts with Gazprom, the Russian state-owned gas company, resulting in a large and dangerous European dependence on Russian gas. And in fact, as of February 2022, close to 60% of all natural gas consumed in Europe came directly from Russia, guaranteeing Vladimir Putin a daily cash flow estimated at several $billion. With so much money circulating in Europe and the United States, many Russian companies, banks and citizens spread many assets across these regions, with all of this being immediately frozen under the sanctions that were imposed against Russia by the West. In Europe alone, and just in cash and bonds, it is estimated that almost $230 billion of Russian origin were frozen, with many more billions frozen in assets such as mansions, yachts and shareholdings in companies. In total, considering Europe and the United States, it is estimated that more than $300 billion in Russian assets were frozen, assets and goods that, according to the law, will be returned when sanctions are lifted. Something that will only happen when Russia gives up on invading Ukraine. Until then, assets remain confiscated, with some, such as deposits and funds, yielding billions annually. As I said, according to the law, all of this will be returned at the end of the war. However, for several months now, a movement to sell these Russian assets has been gaining momentum, with the money raised from these sales going towards the reconstruction of Ukraine. This is a very controversial measure, which in practice violates many conventions of international law. Therefore, despite great interest shown in this initiative, both in Europe and the United States, it has always been very difficult for governments to turn it into law. With that changing this Saturday, April 20th, with the United States Congress approving the REPL acronym in English for Rebuilding Ukraine's Economic Prosperity and Opportunities, a law that will allow the United States government to liquidate Russian assets frozen under the sanctions imposed as a consequence of the invasion of Ukraine. According to the chairman of the Congressional Foreign Affairs Committee, Republican Congressman Michael McCaul, one of the authors of the law, the objective is to send a strong message, not only to Russia, but also to China and Iran, countries that, according to the congressman, are governed by dictators looking for opportunities to advance their agendas of aggression and conquest. Congressman McCaul cited the case of the fall of Afghanistan in 2021, shortly after the dishonorable and disastrous departure of the United States from that country, which allowed the return of Taliban oppression after almost 20 years. Vladimir Putin immediately began to advance against Ukraine through military exercises, which were nothing more than a cover to cover up your real intention to attack and invade your neighbor. For Congressman McCaul, the invasion of Ukraine in February 2022 is directly related to the fall of Afghanistan in 2021, an event that conveyed to the world an image of weakness in the United States, with this weakness whetting Vladimir Putin's appetite and giving him confidence to finally move against Ukraine. Also, according to McCaul, China is attentive to everything that is happening in Ukraine, with Xi Jinping very carefully evaluating the movements and actions of the United States to decide whether or not to invade Taiwan. For the congressman, the only way to avoid wars in the future is to demonstrate strength in the present, and the best way to demonstrate that strength right now is through a huge show of support for the Ukrainian defense, a demonstration that involves not only the $61 billion package in military aid, but also the sale of confiscated Russian goods and assets, with the proceeds from these sales used for the reconstruction of Ukraine. The European Union has been debating the return of precisely this issue for many months. As I said, much of the more than $300 billion in frozen Russian goods and assets are in Europe, with the European community taking very tentative steps towards using these goods and assets for the reconstruction of Ukraine. With the approval of this law in the United States Congress, it could encourage Europeans to take more decisive steps in this direction. With the Russian invasion approaching its completion of 2 years and 2 months, the devastation caused by Putin is gigantic. Therefore, for the United States Congress and for many European politicians, there is nothing fairer than having Putin pay for the reconstruction of the country he is destroying. Any expert you talk to, any General Jack Keane or Mike Pompeo will tell you that there is a national security interest here. Because if Ukraine falls, then Moldova will fall, then Georgia, then Baltica is in danger, and you are looking at the 1939 parallels again. And then, eventually, they're going to come to an agreement with NATO, Article 5, and we're going to have to send our men and women there. And the reason I want this, they are fighting for us, that's what they tell me. And I want to give them everything they need to at least push the Russians back so that we don't have to send our men and women there. It's called deterrence. If we fail at this and surrender in Ukraine, as we did in Afghanistan, does that make the United States more powerful or weaker? This makes us weak because we are not projecting strength, and we lose the trust and confidence of our allies. I think this is a huge mistake and would have a long-term generational impact. I don't want our men and women there, and if we don't do anything, this will happen. Thank you very much for watching the video, and now I invite you press the like button and subscribe to the channel so we'll see you more often, and so you'll be up to date with everything that's happening in the world.